Okay, so we are here recording. This is my very first time that I have a guest on this. I still don't know what it is, a podcast, a video series, but I know this is going to be on YouTube. And I'm with Gabrielle, who actually motivated me to start
Oh.
because we had a coffee chat like a month
hmm
ago, and I shared this idea of having guests in my videos or podcasts. And you said, let's do it.
hmm
And here we are. And she booked a time, and here we are today. So thank you so much, Gabrielle.
Amazing. You're
Thank you
welcome. I'm
so
so
much.
happy to be here.
Awesome. So we met last year in a conference that we attended in Atomicon in
hmm
Newcastle. And before I attended this conference, I had contacted a few people. So it's a huge conference in England. It's a great experience. And I contacted a few people to, get there and know someone. But you were the only one that spent like quality time with me. We have lunch together, and it was very special. You also visited Dublin, where I live, like a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago, and we
Yeah.
met for dinner. I met your mom. It was
Mhm.
such a lovely evening. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's so good. So I will let you introduce yourself, and because these videos, interviews are all about, I want to talk to women of color, migrant women. Most of them will be business women. So for me, and obviously for the people that like what I do, your backstory, where you come from, who are you from, your story is
Mhm.
important. So if you can tell us a little bit who you are, where are you from, and yeah, where do you live now?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Gabrielle Gweneth, originally from the Bahamas. I was born and raised there. Most of my family lived there. And I love being Bahamian, like being an island girl. It's really in my blood. And I currently live in Glasgow, Scotland. So I studied for university in the United States for undergrad and graduate. And sort of in between those, I was away in the States and then back in the Bahamas, and then away in the States and back in the Bahamas. And the last time I moved home, I had been living in New York City and I loved it. And I used to say, I still say, I've never met a city that I didn't like. I love cities. And I moved back to the Bahamas, and my island, Nassau, is the capital. So it has the most people and everything's happening there, but it's tiny. It's 21 miles long and 7 miles wide.
Yeah.
And most of my friends, like pretty much all of my friends actually from high school, were living abroad. They'd even gotten married, so they were staying abroad. And my friends, the friends that I met in college in the States, either they were in the States or went back to their home countries. So it was just me, my mom, and I was, building a new community. But I knew that I wanted to live in a city again. And so I thought about the whole world. And eventually I narrowed it down to the UK, and I Googled best UK cities for millennials. And I decided London wasn't an option because I wanted to go to a low cost of living area, because the Bahamas, if you don't already know, is super high. The cost of living is comparable to living in New York or London or Switzerland. And I
Oh,
can say that
seriously?
having lived in New York, yeah, and visited
Wow.
London and knowing about Switzerland, the cost of living is high. So I
Yes.
wanted, London was not an option. And Glasgow was number one on the list, the first list that I saw, ahead of London, which was number
Mhm.
two. And then on the second list, it was number two behind London. So I packed up my bags and I moved to Glasgow, sight unseen. I'd never been to Scotland before. I came with two suitcases and a duffel bag. So basically, what I could fit in one plane trip in January of 2020. So just before the pandemic, before
Oh,
we knew what was coming. Yeah.
yeah.
And then I've lived here ever since. I thought I would just come for a year or maybe two, because you know how it takes some time to get settled and to get to know a place. But because it was the pandemic, we couldn't go anywhere. We were allowed out an hour and a half a day for most of the first 2 years that I was here. So I didn't really feel like I knew the city. And I wanted to give it more of a chance and myself more of a chance. So nearly 5 years later, here I am. And okay, what do? I'm a brand storyteller and a copywriter. So storytelling is something that I love, and I'm so glad to hear that, this is what you want to do with your series.
Oh, good. Oh, amazing. So I can imagine going back to the Bahamas from New York. You said you stayed in New York. Might
Yeah.
feel like a very tiny place.
Yeah, it was such a huge change. Oh my, it can't even, it's like night and day. I mean, aside from the major change in Glasgow compared to home, I'd say it was the weather more than anything else.
Yeah, I
The
can
weather
imagine.
here, yeah,
Yeah.
so gloomy. Like even now, the sky is completely clouded over.
Hmm.
But with New York, it was more like an energy thing because there's so many
Right.
people, things happening all of the time. And yeah, just this life that at
Yes.
home, is a lot more chill.
Yeah. I totally relate to that because I moved from Wellington, which is a really cool capital in New Zealand, but it's very small too. And now we live in Dublin, and obviously it's bigger and it's so vibrant. There's so much to see and do every weekend. We have activities every weekend, especially this summer.
Yeah. And like we
Yeah,
saw each other. So that was my first time visiting Dublin when we met up for dinner. I had a great time. And you were right. There were so many options. Me and my mom,
I know.
we had
Yes.
2 days and an evening full, one after the other thing that we did. So I can completely understand you having
Yeah.
a full summer. And that's exciting for you that you get to explore so much while you're there.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. All right. So, yeah, so storytelling. That's, well, fascinating. How did you end up working in that or doing that for your clients? What's the background
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. So I've always been a writer. I
Okay.
trace it back to basically, I think I was in second grade and an auntie gave me a Pocahontas diary for Christmas.
That's
And
cute.
yeah, it was this hardback. I don't exactly remember, except it was like a turquoise color with Pocahontas on the front. I guess I remember pretty well. And it had a lock, a physical lock with a little padlock.
Okay.
And so I wrote in that diary, and then I bought another and another, and I've kept a diary ever since. And then I would just write other things. So in high school, my first job that was aligned with what I wanted to do was at a newspaper. So I wrote articles for a newspaper in high
Oh,
school.
wow.
Yeah. And then in university, I studied abroad in Ghana and I wrote for the university's blog. And then I would pitch magazines and different companies to help them with their writing. So I've always done writing. And then when I decided I wanted to start my own business, which was about the time that I moved here, I could tell having all that experience that most of the people the best pay that I ever got basically for my writing was working for business owners. So wanting to be smart about how I was
Ah,
planning, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to keep writing for business owners. And what I missed was the strategy and the relationship aspect that I would get from doing sort of investigative journalism pieces or I studied anthropology. So interviewing my clients to do
yeah,
my
yeah.
anthropology work. And so I thought, okay, well, what does that look like in the business world? Or, for anyone that wants to develop their career, their profession, how does that translate? And I thought, oh, well, it's, storytelling, it's branding for your business. That's what you're doing. You're getting deep and you're translating who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, and you want to do it strategically so that you can connect with your clients.
Hmm.
So that's how I basically backed my way into, oh, what I'm going to offer is brand storytelling. And so I work with business owners and public figures, well-known public figures who want to increase their visibility, grow their audience, and attract more of the best, like aligned clients and stakeholders. And we do that through exploring, uncovering, and strategically sharing their stories.
Okay. Now, the key there for me is their story.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we talk about in this interview. That's what I'm
Yeah.
interested in, especially when I work with clients as well, is because I only do like the visuals, right? But it's also part of the branding, part of what I have to research at the beginning is their story. Not only what's your business, where do you see yourself in 5 years, what are your services, or how much do you charge your clients? It's also, why are you doing this? So, and what is your mission? And a lot of time we don't even directly asking people, how did you come up with this idea or this business or this service? There is always, or almost always, a story of, what happened is because I had these same problems before, or I understand my clients, or I don't know, there is something in the story
Yeah.
behind
Yeah,
that
for
brought you to
sure.
what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing. So I'll say for me, so part of it was this kind of strategic angle, why I chose to work the way that I do. But deeper than that, if you go back to when I was in university and studying in Ghana, I made it my own degree. So it was a mix of anthropology and music. Basically, I was interested in the story of my people, essentially, because throughout high school, we got great history education, but a lot of it was about the big world powers, particularly the US and Britain. And because the Bahamas is a British colony, and because of colonialism, you know, they wiped out the Spaniards or whoever. They wiped out the native Bahamian population. We did have native Indians, and after, I think it was 50 years, the country was completely decimated. There were no native Bahamians
Wow.
left. And then it was uninhabited for 150 years until the first settlers came. It's wild. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and our country didn't become independent until 1973. So there's a lot of our own history that either doesn't exist or hasn't been recorded or has been misrecorded because of the like political colonialist legacy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to learn more about the connection between the Bahamas and just the region, the Caribbean and West Africa because of slavery. And so that was part of what I was studying in Ghana. And we went to actually a couple, but the one in Ghana, Elmina Castle, the site where they would hold soon to be enslaved, I guess at that point they were enslaved people, in these dungeons, these castle sites on the coast before they put them in the ships and sent them across the Atlantic. Yeah.
Oh my
We went to
goodness.
one in Ghana and one in Benin. And the one in Ghana, Elmina Castle, is a physical location still. So you're able to go into the dungeon, and it's hard to imagine because the walls are white and they're not filled with people, but just thinking these were packed full of humans. And there's one tiny window up in the corner there, and they were held here until they went through this tiny doorway, and they called it the door of no return because they never came back. And just thinking about my ancestors being there
Yes.
and
Yeah.
surviving the journey and surviving slavery. And that's what they did because otherwise I wouldn't be here. It was such a powerful moment for me. And I was forever changed. I was like, if they can survive that, then I can do anything. And another thing that
Wow.
I learned, yeah, on that trip was stories of resistance. So a lot of times you hear about slavery and it's like, oh, well, the Africans, they sold one another. They were traders to one another for money, for guns and whatever jewels they could get, which yes, there's that. But the other side of it, another side of it, is that they were resisting. So we went to towns and you could see the historic sites again where people had walls and the holes in the walls where they would, shoot arrows or guns or whatever, the lookout points, the stories of resistance that definitely aren't told the way you hear, oh, they betrayed one another. Um, and that was upsetting because I was like, we didn't just betray one another that way. We were lied to, manipulated, pitted against one another, and we fought back. And people need to know that.
Yeah.
So learning about my ancestors surviving through the journey and enslavement, and about the people that were left behind that fought, that really changed my vision of myself, my self-perception, and what I could do, what was possible, and what I wanted to do, sort of in honor of their memories. And I was like, well, if this is what's happening for me, then what about more people learning this story and learning the stories of their people? It's
Hmm.
so important. It's really transformative. And so that's like the underlying why I think storytelling is so powerful and why I want my clients to share
Yeah.
their stories with their clients, because I know the emotional impact that can have and how that translates to the things that we want and need day to day, like ROI and clients' money, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's really powerful. I guess how that experience for you should be probably was, yeah,
Yeah,
life changing.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and talking about your clients and how you help them like discover or share this story. Um, there are a lot of people who are obviously afraid of or wondering how much do I share. I mean, I
Yeah,
want to keep my privacy, but you
yeah,
want me to tell my story.
yeah.
But how do you balance that? How do you help them?
Yeah. So I work with my clients one-on-one, which is really helpful for me to know what their boundaries are, for us to have those conversations without them feeling like they're already exposed to everyone else that might be in the room, for instance.
Uh-huh.
And then we talk about where their boundaries are. And storytelling for everyone is unique, and you don't have to share as much as someone else in order to achieve your goals or to achieve,
Mhm.
you know, your outcomes for a particular project. So I like to say, you don't have to bear it all and go skinny dipping, essentially. It can feel like, with all the advice online, be authentic, show up every day and just tell your story. It could feel like, oh, I'm just supposed to word vomit or, share
Yeah.
my kids and everything. And, for some people that feels comfortable, and for other people it's not. And so I just respect where clients are, and also say that you can evolve. Your comfort level can evolve, or maybe if you have children and they grow and then they consent, they want to be allowed, or they don't mind being shown. So it's understanding you can respect your boundaries, and also as your seasons change, your boundaries may change. And then knowing what your boundaries are, then we just work with them. Like
Okay.
how much how much detail you go into, for instance. You could share less or share more. Some things you could totally leave off the table. It's really just up to each person.
Yeah. And for those who actually don't know what their boundaries are, how can they start?
Yeah, that's such a
Like
good question.
sharing a little bit, and then how would you
Yeah.
approach that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. Is if you're not doing anything and you're not really sure, then start sharing, and you'll quickly discover where your boundaries are, because you might feel, do you know that term vulnerability hangover?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be, like, when you're vulnerable, say you're having a coaching session,
Uh-huh.
it could be a group coaching session, or maybe you're with a friend or someone that you don't know very well, either a friend that you know well and maybe haven't seen for a long time, so you're digging deep, or someone that you maybe don't know very well. Anyway, the point is, you share to the point where afterwards you feel a little bit raw. You feel a little bit like,
Ah, I get
oh,
it.
I don't
Yeah.
know, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable. And it
Yeah.
could be a sign, or I would say, even if you've ever experienced therapy, I've been to therapy and then afterwards felt like, oh, and it's probably, a
Right.
vulnerability hangover. And so it could be a good thing, like in the case of therapy, or maybe in a safe space when you're coaching, and you're just pushing through some things and you're learning more about yourself. But if, say, you do that online, you have an icky, it's not just a vulnerable feeling, it's like an icky feeling, and you think, okay, that was a line that I don't want to cross again. Or maybe you get feedback
Yeah.
from someone who you respect. A lot of times my clients, they're not necessarily concerned with themselves, or protecting their privacy, but their children or their spouse. So maybe,
Mm.
have a conversation with your partner, with your spouse, if your children are old enough, with your children, so that you get their input, their buy-in, or their consent. And then you would know what you can share. And in the beginning, when you start, what you really want to share is what you were saying, Maribel, like, Why are you in your business? Those things you're going to share over and over. Why are you doing what you're doing? Who are you serving? What's the deeper purpose behind what you're serving? And when you're doing that and your focus is on your clients and what they need to know to work with you, to feel comfortable to work with you, it's less about you sharing yourself to share for sharing's sake. It's not like in a therapy or coaching or friendship situation where you're getting help, you're getting support. It's you're looking outward still. That's where the strategy comes in. So that I think is also a natural check because you're not just sharing to entertain people, you're sharing for them to learn something, for them to take an action.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Because not for entertain people, it's not for entertainment. It's for people to
Exactly.
understand why you're doing what you're doing. That's so good. I love that part.
Yeah. So that's one of my big questions that I ask myself, I ask my clients in my trainings. It's so, as a writer, it's so important to know your audience. And so as a storyteller, it's the same thing. When I'm in my writing practice, who am I writing to? What do they know? What do they need to know? What do I want them to do? The why.
Mm-hmm.
And then you apply that to your storytelling. And thinking about your audience and serving your audience will keep you from that sort of self-indulgence or oversharing that you could be afraid of.
Yeah, so good. Um, a question that popped in my head was I've heard many times clients wondering how much, for example, I do have a business, right? I have an agency, but I
Mhm.
also have like my personal brand, and I've been working on that since last year. A lot of people wonder, okay, I have a business. Why do I have to share personal stuff? Or how do I balance? Do I share on my business page? Do I share on my personal page? How much they connect?
Yeah.
In my case, it connects like a big deal. And I'm trying to find the balance. And actually it's working. I bring in clients through my personal brand to my business, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that person that is wondering, oh, how do I do this? I have a business, but I have
Yeah.
my story, which is personal. How do you
Yeah.
how do you manage that?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think similar sort of principle applies.
Mm,
So, what's your goal? And if you think, mm, there are some really big personal brand businesses out there, especially if you're in the
yeah,
online space or not even on the online space, and the business is driven by that person's personality. And so they are naturally going to share their story. And they also have boundaries. There are things that you will see that they don't share.
yeah,
And so if you are going in that direction, it might seem obvious, but I want to lay it out as well. If you're going in that direction, then expect that you will need to show up. And how will you know if you're going in that direction? At this point, like your agency is Creativa, right? It's
yeah,
not named Maribel's agency. So already you have that separation. If you are like me, for instance, my company is Gabrielle Gweneth Co., then by default, I am the person behind, I am the personal brand. So if your business is named after you, you're slightly on that side of things, however much you are or are not sharing.
yeah,
And if your business isn't named after you and you have to think, okay, how much do I bring in my personality? How much do I share about myself? You are the brand, whether or not people know it's you that's driving the values and the decisions. And so leaning into that will only enhance the strength of your brand and the differentiation of your brand from another one. And so what that can look like, even if you're not sharing as many personal stories as I might or a personality driven brand might, is you leaning into and sharing your why, your mission, your values, and even small things like how you treat your contractors or your clients and how it's informed by those things. So a great example of this is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has a super strong brand. They are a very polarizing brand. And I couldn't tell you maybe I don't know who the owner of Chick-fil-A is. It's the American chicken sandwich brand for anyone who doesn't know.
Uh-huh.
And for instance, they're not open on Sundays. They have a very limited menu. They have a very quirky brand personality. And the reason they're not open on Sundays is because they are led by Christians. And so it's very
Mm.
clear that's why they're not open on Sundays. And there are other elements to their business model, the way that they run, that's related to their brand values that we know because we share them, or not we, they share them. So if
Yeah.
you have a company that's like Chick-fil-A, where you aren't the face, you're still informing the brand culture. And so own that and don't take it for granted that people will just know, because they won't. You need to tell them. And in doing that, you are sharing your story, you're building your brand, and you're creating opportunities to have conversations that will let you get a little bit personal as well.
That's good. If you could give people that are listening or watching one advice to do today, let's say we have business women watching this and wondering, oh, I totally what we're saying, but where do I start? What do I do? Is it one or two practical tips that you can give them?
I would say, in terms of a small step that you could take on a regular basis, because the important thing, this as a designer, is to reinforce. So you want to have consistency in the visuals. You want
Yes.
to, everywhere that there's a visual, you want the colors, the font, all of that to be the same. It's the same thing with your messaging. You want it to be consistent and you want to reinforce that message. So if there's a message that you can share on a regular basis, then do that. And it could be through your newsletter if you send that on a regular basis, or a post or a live or something that you do on social media. What is the message that you can share on a regular basis? And it doesn't have to be anything major. It could be a little tagline, a little vocalization. So for me, I realize at the end of my videos, I say ciao for now. So that's like my little signature goodbye, which isn't a whole big, deep, brand message, but it is my consistent sign
Yeah.
off, my consistent message. So, you have your colors and you have your sign off. So that's a creative and small way that you could use your words, use your messaging to strengthen and to build your brand. And then another small, or maybe not small, but simple thing that you could do is to consider what's a really important story for your business,
Mhm.
whether it's related to your services, your clients, who you serve, why you serve them, that you haven't shared, that people need to know, or it would make a difference if they knew, and tell that story. So that's a small thing. You could do it repeatedly, or you listen to this and you're like, oh, I'm going to do that tomorrow, and then you do it. But that's
Yeah.
so important. So identify, like for me, at the beginning of our conversation, I talked about going to Ghana and how it had such a big impact on my belief in the importance and the transformational nature of stories. I share that regularly. That's a key part of who I am, why I'm doing my work, and it will get a certain kind of people to work with me. And you have that too. So, and don't try and judge it either. That's a big thing. It's like, oh, my story's not cool enough. It's not that
Yeah.
interesting. The important thing, does it resonate with you? Is it important for you? And then share it. Just let people know.
Yeah. Every story is
Every
interesting.
story,
Maybe not to everyone, but it's going to
Mhm.
resonate with the right people. And the
Exactly.
right people is the people that you want to work with.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that is so true. So true. Yeah, reinforcing and
So big.
consistency, so key.
Yeah.
Especially when you are trying to, yeah, talking about messaging, what you are sharing.
Yeah.
People think that they have to share something new every time.
Yeah.
But you can share the same
The same
story
thing.
regularly, and that's what sticks to people.
Yeah, because
And
we
then
need to
in the
be
long run,
reminded.
that's true. Yeah, that has
Yeah.
been working for us as well. We share all the time that we are an all-women agency, and we are doing it because you know,
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
created the business because we couldn't find our job ourselves. So we created
Mm-hmm.
an agency. And
Right.
people know the story because we've been telling
Telling it
it
over and over.
over and over.
And it might feel like boring to you sometimes, or again to you. But for someone, it's the first time that they're hearing it, or
Yes.
they heard it before and they forgot, or it didn't land the right way. So you need to keep telling them. And so I studied anthropology and music. I did a lot of music, and I have a master's degree actually in music. So when at
Mm,
that level, talking about ethnomusicology, we learned about a thing called a sound mark. So, a watermark is the visual thing on the paper, whether it's real paper or like a PDF. There's the audio equivalent to a watermark is a sound mark. So if you think about the da-da at the beginning of Netflix,
yes.
or any movie like Metro Goldwyn Mayer, 20th Century Fox, the music that you hear at the beginning, that's the sound mark. And they repeat it over and over and over so that you
Yes.
don't need to see at this point, you know what it, if you hear the sound, you'll think of the logo, you'll think of the company. And that's what you want to do with your story, with your little ciao for now or whatever. So
Yes.
people associate it with your brand, and it's part of the consistency and building of the brand.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
So good. Well, Gabrielle, is there anything else you want to add to this conversation?
Uh, no, it's been such a pleasure talking to you about this. I think really the key things we shared, everyone has a story that will resonate with their people. You can
Yes.
start small, you want to stay consistent. And, I guess the last thing would be start today if you haven't already. What's
Yeah.
stopping you? Because it's
Yeah.
going to get you to reach more people and get to have a bigger impact with the work that you are doing already in the world.
Yeah. And to find your people,
To find your people.
your
Yeah.
people.
Because
Yes.
people love stories. I mean, I made this example up, but it's so useful. Do I remember what you had for breakfast last Tuesday? It was just last Tuesday. But unless you eat the same thing every day, like, do you remember what you had for breakfast last Tuesday?
No,
No. Do you even
no.
remember what you had for breakfast this Tuesday?
I have to think about it.
Exactly. But if
Yeah.
you were to say, okay, what's a story that you heard as a child? Like maybe your grandparent told you a story,
Mm,
and you needed to tell it to me or to a child to entertain them, you could do it. Even though you hadn't heard it in decades, you could tell the story. You're confident, I'm sure. Could you tell the story from your childhood?
yes.
Yeah, which is
Yes.
way longer ago than Tuesday, and what you had for breakfast.
Exactly.
So stories are sticky. We love to share them, and we feel more connected to each other when we do. So share your story.
Lovely. Share your story. That's a
Yeah,
quote for today.
for
Share your
today.
story.
Yeah.
So where can people find you, contact you? Yeah, get in touch with you.
Yeah, I am on Instagram at Gabrielle Gweneth, and my website is gabriellegweneth.com. I think, can you see my name on the screen?
Yes, but we put all the links on
The
the
link.
show
Yeah.
notes. Yeah,
And
around
then,
here.
so
Yeah.
thank you. My surname is Misiewicz. It's a Polish surname. And so it's complicated for people to, in English or any language, to remember and spell, which is why I use Gabrielle Gweneth.
I
Um,
see.
yeah, my grandmother is Gwyneth. That's another story. But
Oh, look at another story.
so
Well, your
yeah,
mother's story is another story too.
she's
I have
another
to say.
story. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I'm Gabrielle Misiewicz because that's my government name on LinkedIn.
Okay.
But if you look me up on Instagram, you can always DM me and
Okay.
and
So
we can
that's the
get in
main
touch.
place that you hang out, Instagram?
Instagram and LinkedIn,
Yeah.
those are my two main places. So
Okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to hear
Awesome.
from anybody.
Good.
Feels
All
like
right.
this resonated.
Yeah. Well, anyone that wants to talk to Gabrielle, you'll find the
Mhm.
links around here, show notes,
In the
description.
show notes. Yeah.
And yeah, well, Gabrielle, thank you so much for being my first guest.
Oh, so it was so great. I
Excited.
love this conversation. Thank you for
We
having me.
did it. Yeah,
We
we did
did.
it. We
Yay.
did.
And congrats to
Yay.
you on getting the first
Thank
one
you.
done. This is amazing.
Yay.
First of many wonderful ones.
Yes, hopefully. Yes, yeah, yeah. First of many.
Definitely.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Gabrielle.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.